Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story in which Karen mistakes our OP for a fast food worker, then misses out on a job opportunity. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoy the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. Karma will bite you, Karen? There was a point in time years ago where I worked in a supermarket on one of the most flamboyant streets in our city. I will not go into details about what it was like working for this particular supermarket, but when 3 separate staff members were under so much stress that, well, they thought of doing something not so nice, you can imagine just how toxic it was. The fact that I managed to last 2.5 years was extraordinary. Anyway, I was pretty much the assistant store manager in everything but job title and pay rate. I had a store manager who was so lazy that I did most of his work for him. He also liked to clock out earlier than he should, just so he could beat the traffic to get home. Remember this fact for later. It was my day off, but I had come in to do an emergency order. One of our freezer units had broken down and I needed to reorder all the spoiled stock. I'd done the order and then decided to head up the road to a fast food establishment where the burgers are better. I was dressed in just a plain black polo shirt and black denim jeans, nothing special. The uniform for this fast food establishment was red shirt, black pants. I'd placed my order and sat down at a nearby table when I waited for them to prepare it. There were about 3 other people waiting for orders and about 3 people waiting in line to order. Then in walks Karen. She sees the line and waits very impatiently. After about a minute, she spies me and comes over to me. Karen, why are you not up there taking orders? Me, excuse me? Karen, why are you not taking orders? You shouldn't be sitting around like this. Me, I don't work here. Karen, bullcrap, I see you here all the time. Now get up there and take my order. Me, but like I said, I don't work here. Karen, you're just being lazy. You just don't want to work. Me, I don't want to work? Karen, exactly. And with that attitude, you'll never be any more than a fast food employee. Me, look, this is my day off. And like I said, I do not work here. At that moment, my order is ready. So I get up and grab my order. Karen follows right behind me. Karen, so now you're going to take even longer to take my order? This is ridiculous. Me, look, if you want to place an order, there's no line right now. Karen, I don't care if there's a line or not. I want you to do my order or I'll get you fired. Me, look, I told you I don't work here. I told you it's my day off. I told you there's no line. Now I'm leaving with my food to enjoy it somewhere away from a rude, obnoxious person like you. Karen, how dare you call me obnoxious? Karen proceeds to grab my drink and tip it over me, and then the floor. The manager comes out and asks what's happening. I tell him my side of the story. Karen tells him her side of the story. The manager replaces my drink, gives me a large fries for free, and allows me to leave while he talks to Karen. I decide to go back down to work and use the staff room to eat my lunch. While there, I get a phone call from the store manager, SM. SM, hey OP, are you still in the city? Me. Yes, why? SM, well, I left early and I'm nearly home now. I just remembered that I had a job interview lined up for this afternoon. Me. And? SM, well, you have experience with job interviews. Can you do it for me? Me. Okay, when's the interview? SM, she should be there in a couple of minutes. It's for a cashier role, so you know what to ask. Me. Yep, okay. I go to the front counter and tell the girls to send the person for the interview down to the store manager's office when she gets here. I finish up my lunch and wait. There's a knock on the door opens, and it's Karen, here for a job interview. The first words out of her mouth were, I'm not going to get this job, am I? And I just shook my head. She went from demanding you take her order to realizing she's in for a completely different kind of serving. Life has a funny way of dishing out justice. And our second story. Parking brake. One of the reasons my marriage works is that my husband and I have very similar opinions most of the time. One of the notable exceptions to this is the parking brake. When I learned to drive, I was taught to use the parking brake every time I parked. Once I got my license, I learned that not everyone actually does that. I made a conscious decision to continue to use the parking brake for every park. It's better to use it when it's not needed than to forget it when it is needed. Also, building the habit of taking the brake on and off means I'm less likely to end up driving around with the parking brake on and eventually needing an expensive repair. My husband only uses the parking brake when he parks on a very steep hill. Parked on any hill, he turns the steering wheel so that if the car rolls, it'll roll into the curb. He actually does what a lot of people do, including my driving instructor. He turns the wheel, then lets the car roll until it's touching the curb. He claims this is extra safe. I don't think it's any safer than just turning the wheel. Tires are expensive and it's unnecessary wear and tear on them to leave them smashed up against a curb. We've come to an agree to disagree about the parking brake. He sometimes grumbles a little when he drives a car that I drove earlier and has to remember to take the brake off, but it's not really any kind of big deal. Well, my stepdaughter learned to drive. Her dad has been the main driving instructor, but with his blessing, because I'm not her actual parent, I've done some driving instruction too. The first time the emergency brake came up, we explained to her that Dad and I had different habits about how we use the parking brake. We told her that for simplicity, while she was learning, she should do it Dad's way, but when she's out driving on her own, she'll eventually develop her own habits. This was about a year ago. Today, my stepdaughter drove, and it was the first time she parked on a hill by a curb. It was a slight hill, but definitely a hill. She parked by the curb and asked if she should use the parking brake. At the same time, I said yes, and her dad said no. He instructed her to turn the wheel and let the car roll into the curb, and that was good enough. I let him finish this instruction. When we got out, though, I said that I prefer to use the emergency brake and not press the tires against the curb. I didn't say his way was wrong. I just shared that I do the same parking job a different way than her dad does it. This is a normal thing we've done throughout her learning to drive. Well, I don't know. My husband must have gotten up on the wrong side of the bed because he got a little salty and said, maybe you should read the driver's manual and see what it says about parking. I was a little annoyed, but I was going to let it drop. However, once we got to where we were headed and I had a minute, I thought I should do just that. We currently live in a different state than the one I learned to drive in, and I've never read the driver's manual for this state. I have no idea what the laws or suggestions about parking brakes are. So I pulled up the state manual on my phone and looked at the section on parking. Boom, right at the top. You should use your parking brake every time you park. In the section on hill parking, it says to turn the wheel, but it doesn't say to roll your car until the tire's up against the curb. I showed this to my stepdaughter and she found it hysterical, especially since her dad did learn to drive in this state from his dad, who was a retired cop, although he also rarely uses his parking brake. My husband just rolled his eyes at me. I went on to tell my stepdaughter that the most important thing is to secure her car in some way when she parks on a hill. Her dad and I are both good drivers, and as she gets more experience, she'll figure out the things that make the most sense to her. I guess the best question to ask is, hey, insurance, is my car covered if I don't apply the parking brake and the car rolls, causing damage? And our last story. I fought the HOA and I won. This story takes place in Ontario, in the city of Kawartha Lakes, one of the worst municipalities in all of Ontario in which to live. There's poverty, crime, alcoholism, a culture of prideful ignorance, and die-hard partisan voters that'll vote against their best interests time and time again. The city council are looting their tax base to provide free educational opportunities for unqualified staffers they hired, holding secret meetings behind the public's back, and in one case spent $140K to fight a lawsuit that was levied against them after they blocked a brand new business's access road because some city council members owned a competing business. They were fined $70K and spent another $70K of taxpayer dollars to appeal and lose. That's all backstory. Suffice to say, it's a city run by uneducated rubes and inhabited by the most apathetic voters I've ever encountered. My old man was an original property owner of an unassumed road for 50-plus years. For the uninitiated, this means that although the city owned the road, they're not responsible for maintenance, grooming, etc., beyond the scope of the limited service agreement they made with a single property owner, who we later found out forged signatures claiming he represented the entire road. The LSA basically meant they would do 2 gradings per year, though they actually only provided 1. About 20 years ago, some city idiots, moved up on the road and decided they'd create an HOA. They didn't get insured, they didn't incorporate, and they thought they could go around forging signatures on city documents and charging residents money for essentially nothing. It all came to a head about 10 years ago. My dad refused to pay them until the two chuckleheads in charge showed him how they spent the money. Rather than provide a fair accounting of the neighborhood funds, the president and the treasurer both decided they wanted to sue for the money owing. Well, we went to court, and it turns out that you don't just get to declare yourself the head of an association that doesn't exist. Turns out you can't collect money from the residents and spend it on cookware and paying their unqualified, uninsured friends to do road work. Turns out perjury is frowned on in small claims court. They found out the hard way. I discovered in their court filings examples of perjury, fraud, and general dishonesty. They manufactured documents and got caught doing so. They were given multiple options to settle in court, but turned them all down, instead choosing to self-destruct in the most absurd and stubborn way available to them. None of their witnesses showed up. They brought literally no evidence with them to court, instead relying on the phrase, "It's not rocket science," and they somehow assumed the judge would accept "it's not rocket science" as some kind of evidence or as somehow lending credibility to their claims. He didn't. The HOA lost and ended up owing us money. The HOA dissolved immediately afterwards, and if the story ended there, it'd make sense, but not be a very interesting story. But you're not here for a good guys win story, you want satisfaction. Turns out one of those two old men that fancied themselves in charge of the HOA couldn't accept defeat. Our driveway lights started to disappear, and someone was blocking the culvert in the middle of the night and washing out the road in front of my dad's house. Minor vandalism was happening almost on a nightly basis. So I came home late one night, and sure enough, this 70-year-old moron is thrashing about in the April temperature swamp, having fallen in after blocking the culvert. He's got his shirt tangled in an underwater branch and couldn't get out. We had to haul him out because he was so drunk and suffering from hypothermia that he couldn't even move. Then we called the cops. He got yelled at, trespassed, and no driveway lights ever went missing again, and the cops let me keep the trash can lid he was using to block the culvert. Free lid. Moral of this story is don't take crap off an HOA. They may look official, but I'll bet you most HOAs are doing something shady that'll reflect poorly on them in court should you find yourself at odds with them. A neighborhood without an HOA must feel like a breath of fresh air. The diversity of how people maintain their properties and the absence of someone breathing down your neck about your grass must be incredibly liberating. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.